The mirror and the maze. I think the mirror is the maze. Let's try to figure out how. To begin with, we are supposed to talk about human suffering. We are all suffering to a certain extent. It all started with Kapil Muni around 11,000 years ago, when he first quoted Ataha Trivida Dukkha Atyanta Nivrutti Atyanta Purusharth. The sole purpose of human existence is to get liberated from three fundamental and cardinal sufferings. So Kapil had 11,000 years. It took another 4 or 5,000 years for Patanjali to figure out how to do it. Krishna took maybe 4,000 years, Buddha around 3,000, Shankara around 1,000, and we have 12 minutes to decode it. I'm not here to sell band-aids. I don't believe in them. We are here to understand and discuss the wounds. Let's get to it. The problem and the paradox. What are we trying to solve? Paradox. Let's take an example of a ship of Theseus, a very popular paradox, where you go on changing every component of the ship one by one. You change the steering, you change the body, you change the engine, you go on changing every part of the ship. And at one moment of time, you have a ship with all the new parts. So is it an old ship or is it a new ship? Now there are defenses and arguments to support the either side. New ship simply because all the components are new, and old because the essence remains the same. And you go on arguing. But when I push you to come to a solution, what does the mind do? The mind drops this situation. You are no longer able to sustain that argument. And what makes you drop that situation? The moment mind realizes that it's a paradox, the mind drops it. We need to figure out whether suffering is a problem or a paradox that we are trying to solve. Let us take an example of a broken chair. There is a broken chair, a broken table, a broken board. Now, when you try to solve the problem of a broken chair, there is an object, the chair, there is an object, the table, there is an object, the board. And when you are trying to solve the problem, the thinking mechanism, the mind which is thinking, this thinking mechanism has a separate existence from the object. The object has a separate existence, the object functions independently of the thinking mechanism. Do you realize that? So when the thinking mechanism is separate from the object, you can succeed in solving the problem of the broken chair. But what happens when it comes to suffering? Now, who is it that is suffering? Who suffers? The mind has created an idea, an image about your own self. Who am I? So when you are abused, when you are not treated well, when you are looked down upon, what gets hurt? The image that the mind has created gets hurt. And who has created that image? The mind itself. So is the image separate from the mind? Can the image exist on its own without the mind, without the thinking mechanism? Just like the chair had its own separate existence, independent of the thinking mechanism? So when you try to solve the problem created by the thought with the thought, it becomes a paradox. Because on one hand, you are trying to sustain the thought. You are trying to nourish the thought. You are thinking more about that self, that image. At the same time, the same thought is building up that image many more times. So on either sides, you are just piling up. And when do you realize that it is a paradox? When you see it. So when the mind observes, when the mind realizes this fact that what you are trying to solve is a paradox, it is not a problem, the mind will drop it. You have to experiment to figure this out. I am given 12 minutes, but you take 12 years to figure that out. There is no rush. But the point is, okay, the mind has to see whether what you are trying to solve is a problem or a paradox. You will find that 90% of the situations, 90% of the things we are trying to solve are paradoxes in nature. They are not the problems. For the remaining 10%, let's see how the mind is solving the problem. Since the early childhood, we have been given problems to solve. The moment you are in school, in your class, the first obvious mathematical question is how much is 2 plus 2 equal to, and the answer is 4. So the moment your answer is 4, you are appreciated, you are acknowledged. What happens if you said 3? What happened when you said 5? You were discouraged. Maybe you were corrected. And there were many more problems that were posed upon. The intensity of the problems went on increasing. Then there was a race that you ran. Those who came first, appreciated, acknowledged. The one who came last, still seek their identity. So the kind of mind that we have nurtured, we have all nurtured a mind. We are all in a situation where we have conditioned the mind. And in that state of a conditioned mind, we have become nothing but a problem-solving mind. You realize how this problem-solving mind is functioning? This has been trained, it has been nurtured, it has been conditioned to solve the problems. And the identity of the mind, the identity of the self is closely linked with your ability to solve the problem. How elegantly you have solved the problem. What is the efficiency of the problem that you have solved? And unless you solve the problem, your identity is at stake. So the identity is very closely linked with your ability to solve the problem. So in a nutshell, we have become nothing but a problem-solving mind. Now what happens when there is no problem? In order to safeguard that identity, the mind creates one. And when you fail to solve that issue, when you fail to solve that problem, when you try to solve that problem, you don't succeed. Why? Because the problem itself was not there. It was created by you. So another 90% of the 10% remaining, if you realize that those are the problems that the mind has created for the sake of its identity and to prove that, yes, I can solve that, that is stopped. Now, those problems which still remain, which are actually the problems, do we have another way to look at life? Do we have another way to look at our existential issues? Mind you, children, don't apply this logic when you try to appear in your examinations, otherwise you'll blame me for your poor performance. We need to find out, is there a completely different approach to our life, to our existential issues, our anxieties, feelings, our sorrows and sufferings and the rest? Do we have another completely different way of looking at it, keeping the problem-solving mind aside? Can you approach the problem without the demand to solve it? Can you approach the problem without the demand to solve it? If you succeed, then you will realize that you are living with the problem. There is no secondary conflict which has been created in order to eliminate the primary conflict. I am angry. I should not be angry. So what should I do that I should not be angry? Then you are trying to experiment and devise methods and techniques, and when you apply them, you see that you are not very successful. Now, instead of trying to find a way, a method, a technique out of the demand to solve the problem, can we just brush aside the demand to solve the problem and focus only on the problem and live with the problem and be the problem? When you do that, what happens? You are completely with the problem. Now you have understood the problem. Focus on understanding the problem rather than the rush to solve it. So when you are with the problem, you live with the problem, you completely, totally understand the problem, what happens? The problem dissolves because you have fully understood it. In most of the cases, the problem will dissolve. And in the remaining 10% of that 10% of that 10%, when the problem is still there, you will find that the solution is a part of the problem. The solution is not separate from the problem. The problem and the solution are two sides of the same coin. They don't have separate existence. But that you will be able to realize only when you are with the problem. So there is a problem, I am angry, and there is a demand that I should not be angry. So eliminate the demand of I should not be angry first in order to arrive at what is anger. So rather than trying to figure out methods and ways of how not to be angry, why not focus on understanding the anger? Be completely with the anger, live with it. What's wrong with anger? Understand it. Go into the depth of the anger and figure out. So when you look at the mirror and the maze, when you look at the mirror, the obvious question that comes to your mind is, of course, who am I? The profound question, who am I, is not supposed to have an answer. The question, who am I, is supposed to dissolve the questioner. Meditate on that. But of the 1% still remaining, let us try to figure out from where are they coming. So in this process of living, we have created a lot of concepts. The role of intelligence is to take you away from the real to the ideal. The human body and mind are designed to deal with the real. They are not designed to deal with the ideal. But with the intelligence, what we have done is we have moved away from the real to the ideal. And in this process, we have created concepts. Concepts. Chaos is real. Harmony is a concept. Pleasure is real. Happiness is a concept. I wonder whether happiness really exists. Pleasure is real, but the mind demands the continuity of the pleasure without understanding the fact that pleasure and pain go together. So when you demand high pleasure, are you prepared to take high pain? No. The mind demands high pleasure without the preparedness to take that level of pain. And pain and pleasure are the two sides of the same coin again. So how can you demand the perpetuality of the pleasure without demanding or without accepting the perpetuality of pain? It is simply not possible. So when you demand the perpetuality of the pleasure and we term it as happiness or whatever it is, how can the mind be conscious about the happiness and be happy at the same time? How can you be conscious about your good health? You can be conscious only when you are ill, when you are sick. The mind cannot be conscious of your good health. Similarly, how can the mind be conscious of the happiness? You realize? So, I want to be happy, I think is the biggest cause of suffering. The demand that I should be happy. And why? Because it is a part of the concepts that we have built up. We have built up order, we have built up peace, love, success, so many of them. And then we try to find meaning and associate our identity with them and try to figure out how to resolve. So primarily, first figure out whether they are real or they are concepts. And if they are concepts, if you see that they are concepts, I'm sure you'll have enough reasons to drop them. After listening to the suffering of thousands of people over so many years, this is something that I realized that life we have reduced to nothing but internal rationalization. हम जिंदगी भर खुद को ही समझाते रहते. And we find different ways to do it, different philosophies, different ideologies, different texts, different gurus, different wonderful ways we invent eventually to internally rationalize ourselves. But we do not succeed because they are all band-aids. The earlier speaker did cite something about comparing, and then of course when you think that you are shorter, you look at the people shorter than you, so then you get a feeling that yes, you are taller. So these are the therapeutic methods which work, I don't deny, but they still act as band-aids. What we are trying to address is the wounds. We are not trying to find out band-aids. There are no pack of cards that this can end your suffering, this can end your suffering. No. You have to go into the details. You have to go into the depth and just try to understand what the situation is. But if we can brush aside the process of internal rationalization, which is a byproduct of the thinking mechanism, understanding that the thought is the culprit here, and let the thought be used only as a tool, and let the thought not contaminate what the process is. In that situation, when we transcend the thinking mechanism and you listen to your emotions, be with them. Don't try to escape them. Don't try to find a way out. maybe you realize that there is no suffering. And even if there is, maybe you realize that there is no sufferer. Thank you.